Hello you all, welcome back. She Loves God here, part 2 of this topic of women preaching and women teaching and women speaking. Now first of all, I want to differentiate my view on that. When it comes to teaching, I always view teaching as something you do to people who are already saved, who are already believers. You know, there's no use in you trying to teach Jesus' commands and Paul's sound doctrine to unbelievers, Satanists and atheists. So, of course, teaching is something you do for believers. And preaching is something you do to unbelievers. There's no need in you to preach the gospel to people who are already saved. You don't need to preach to the choir. So I believe that I always like to differentiate that Paul said women should not be teaching. And he was writing this to Timothy. I'm guessing he was directing it towards their church. So whatever church that he was a part of, or whatever churches he was going around to, that Timothy was going around to, apparently Paul, the apostle, wanted Timothy to know and to share this message that he did not want women to be teaching. So I'm not sure exactly. I've not studied it too much to see exactly where Timothy was. I know it says here in chapter 1 verse 3, it says, "As I besought thee to abide still at Ephesus when I went into Macedonia, that thou mightest charge some that they teach no other doctrine." So I'm guessing Timothy had that. I'm assuming that Timothy was hanging out at Ephesus, teaching sound doctrine, and this is something that Paul wanted him to share with the church in Ephesus. So he's saying, "I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority over the man." Now, like I said in the inner part, 1, I actually don't agree with women being, pastors and bishops. I don't mind, I don't mind women, preaching or whatever. And I don't mind women preaching, whatever, and ministering, but it's something about, I don't know, it's just something about women, over a man, like a woman telling a man she's not even married, because women can't even boss their own husbands around. So it's like, for you not to be able to tell your husband what to do, if you're a Christian, it's kind of strange that you can boss every male in your congregation around. And pastors can and do tend to be bossy. So it's like, it just seems kind of weird that he just said, "Do not usurp authority." Now, of course, the word usurp, the word usurp, it means, kind of like to take over. Like I just came in and took over and, took over your authority. Which is kind of like what I told you about in part 1 about this guy. He wrote me on YouTube saying that he didn't like that I was, I guess usurping authority over men. And I'm just like, well, first of all, for me to usurp, it seems as if you have to already have a certain amount of people in your control or whatever. Or you have to have a certain position or title or whatever. And, I've not at all taken anyone's title. I'm no one's pastor. I'm no one's teacher, nothing like that. I'm just Misty Quinn who likes to learn, who likes to share what she's learned on YouTube to make people think. The word for usurp, the definition for usurp, it means to take the place of, or it can mean seize and take control without authority. In this case, of course, is God is given authority, or without Paul's given a sound doctrine authority. So it means seize and take control without authority, and possibly with force, take as one's right or possession. So you don't see me with the church here trying to bring people to my church that this is not the church of Misty. This is just, I told you all, this is just Misty Queen who loves to learn, loves to study, and I like to share what I've learned with people. And YouTube is one of the easiest ways to do that. So anyways, so like I said, I'm not really supportive of women being pastors and bishops, whatever. And some people will probably be surprised to hear me say this, but I'm against feminism. I'm like 100% against feminism because, first of all, feminism is not in the Bible. God is not supporting feminism. Jesus did not support feminism. So I'm not going to support something God is not with. You don't know who started that. And if you actually studied what feminism's roots are, you will see that it's actually kind of disturbing. So I'm not a feminist at all. So this is not a video for me to make an excuse for women to be pastors and whatnot, because I'm not all about that. Now, so he says, do not usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence. So when he says to be in silence, where is he saying to be silent at? We see that he already told the church in Corinth to be silent in the assembly. So let's just say your assembly, let's just say your gathering, like I told you all in part 1, they didn't meet in church buildings like how we have. That started like in the 300, that started in like 300 AD when Constantine built the first church building, they say. So there was no church building. They met at people's houses, or they met outside or whatever, but they did not meet like we do in church buildings. So he said he does not want the woman to be talking in the assembly. So let's just say in your assembly, let's just say you have 25 people in your assembly, and they all come together. Let's just say they met here in my bedroom, and we all met here, and let's say there's 5 men and there's 20 women. Those 20 women, according to what Paul is saying, should not be saying anything. They should just sit there quietly, because if they talk, it is a shame, and it's not even permitted for them to speak. But just those 5 men should be speaking. And that's just what I get from what he's saying. He just said to be silent. So that's not really, people say, well, what does he mean by that? It's pretty self-explanatory. It's pretty simple. Just be quiet, be silent. Now, I don't know what all he means by silent. He could mean, I don't want you all in the pulpit teaching, like how we have pulpits. If Paul was alive today, would he say, I don't want you women in the pulpit? Or would he say, I don't want you women, you know how women are very emotional in the church. They'll be like, thank you, Jesus, thank you, Lord. They'll be yelling all loud and everything. And, they say, touch your neighbor and tell your neighbor it's going to be all right. That's talking as well. So do they mean no talking whatsoever? If a woman yells out, priest, reverend, is that, is Paul against like all talking? Or does he just mean, talking from a speaker or a leader position? So I always wonder, what he meant by be silent. Because some churches believe in women being silent. They don't believe in women preachers or women teachers. But the women will be talking all during the service. Preach, pastor, tell your neighbor, he's going to be all right. He's going to work it out for you. They're still talking. And then some churches, the women, they will be, they'll give the announcements. They'll give the church announcements. Now, of course, they, who knows, they may not have had announcements like how we do. But some churches, I know a church my mom used to go to as a kid, they don't let women teach or preach at that church. But the women will give announcements all the time, So, and I think when they have like when it's like a special, like a women's, I think when it's like a special like women's conference or something, the woman, she'll speak for the women's conference, but only over women. She cannot speak over men. She cannot teach men. So, Paul, did he mean women cannot speak to children, like in a Sunday school setting or whatever, or a children's Bible study? Did he mean that women cannot talk to other women? I wondered. The guy who wrote me that, the messages on my YouTube channel, I wondered, would he be happier if I just only, talk to women, if all my viewers were women? And the thing about YouTube is that it can show you what your demographics, what the demographics of your audience are. So I actually see, and I actually have like a pretty even number, 50-50, 50% male, 50% female. So would he be happier if it was 100% of 100% female subscribers or female viewers? So I just wonder, when he said silent, what all did he mean by that? Now, something I want to point out, because it's some churches I've seen on YouTube. I looked up churches and pastors on YouTube, and they're just vehement. They're so set on women not teaching or preaching, and they'll spend a whole sermon talking about women preaching. And I'm just amazed at that, because there's only 2 pastors that talk about it. So I don't know how they get so much out of that. But these same preachers, I've not seen a single one of them do a video on the qualifications of a bishop. Because when I look at the qualifications of a bishop, if you look at 1 Timothy chapter 3, you will see several verses written just about the bishop's position. So I thought it was kind of interesting how they could find a whole sermon worth of material on women not being preachers, when there's only a couple verses about that. And yet there's a whole chapter dedicated to men in the ministry. Actually, Titus 1 talks about it, and 1 Timothy chapter 3. And I'm going to read you a few verses of that. 1 Timothy chapter 3. This is a true saying. If a man desire the office of a bishop, he desireth a good work. A bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behavior, given to hospitality, apt to teach, not given to wine, no striker, not greedy of filthy lucre. I'm running out of fingers now. Let me keep reading. But patient, not a brawler, not covetous, one that ruleth well his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity, not a novice, have a good report of unbelievers, because it says a good report of them which are without. And so, that's probably about 15, at least 15 different things a bishop has to fulfill. And I can just name you about 10 dudes off the top of my head right now who are not qualified to be a bishop, but they are actually very well known, very much respected bishops, and all of them should be out of the office position of a bishop based on the scriptures. But yet these preachers who preach against women speakers will not spend a single sermon about this right here. I know so many preachers off the top of my head, and I'm sure you all can too, who are bishops. You probably seen them on TV, probably in your own jurisdiction or your own denomination, and who are not qualified. And then we go into deacons. Let's not just stop at bishops, because there are a lot more deacons than there are bishops. Let's see about what the deacons have to have. Verse 8 of chapter 3 of 1 Timothy. The deacons must be grave, not double-tongued, not given to much wine, not greedy of filthy lucre, holding the mystery of the faith in a pure conscience. They first have to be proved. They have to be found blameless. They must have wives that are also grave, and their wives cannot be slanderous, and their wives must be sober. I'm running out of fingers again. And their wives must be faithful in all things. And the deacons can only be the husband of one wife. The deacons must rule their children well. The deacons must rule their own houses well. And so when you look at that, you're thinking, so there are so many more qualifications for bishops and deacons, and yet if we had all these men to this standard, 90% of bishops and deacons would be out of business. So I think that's very strange, how we can pick and choose. They say women preachers will pick and choose which parts of the Bible they're going to obey. They say some women pastors intentionally skip over, parts of 1 Corinthians 14 and 1 Timothy chapter 2 because they feel as if it'll condemn them, so they'll skip over it. Let's also look at what Paul wrote to Titus. It was so important he wrote it to two different men. This is Titus chapter 1. This says, it says, verse 6 he has to be blameless, the husband of one wife. He has to have faithful children, and they have to be Christian believers. It also goes on to say they cannot be accused of riot or unruly. If your kids are accused of being riotous and troublemakers and unruly and uncontrollable, and if their teachers say that about your kids, then you cannot be a bishop according to this. They have to be the husband of, It said they must be blameless as a steward of God. They cannot be self-willed. They cannot be soon angry. They cannot be given to wine. They cannot be a striker. They cannot be given to filthy lucre. They have to be a lover of hospitality. They have to be a lover of good men. They have to be sober. They have to be just. They have to be holy. They have to be temperate. They have to hold fast the faithful word as he has been taught. And he has to be able to convince and exhort, to both convince. He has to be able to both exhort and convince the gainsayers by sound doctrine. And so many bishops that I know do not fit this description. So are we rushing to sit them down, or are we just looking at I know it's easier to point out all the females because they're easier to spot. You can tell a female and say, sit down. Sarah, sit down. Michelle, sit down. Leslie, sit down, because they're so easy to spot. But if you took the time to follow the word, many of these bishops and deacons would be out of business. So look for part 3. Thank you. That should be the last part.